Shalom, brothers. First off, I want to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai Bashem, Harachak Wadash. Double honors to our apostles and elders and teachers at Great Millstone who taught us His truth. My name's Brother Howard Shai Zion from the Great Millstone, Pennsylvania camp. I want to give a big shout out to the brothers at the Jersey camp. Shalom to you brothers, man. And see you soon. And shalom to the brothers at the Philly camp and all the brothers in the Great Millstone Akim across the four corners of the earth as well. Shalom. All right, so what you see here, man, is Luke. You know, this looks like a, as they call it, a fresco, you know, of Luke, you know. And you see he's got dark skin, you know, pretty much like an afro and whatnot, you know. I'm not saying that this is what he looks like. I'm just, you know, whatever. So the title of this video is Who Was Luke? Who was Luke? You know, because you really kind of don't hear about him too much. But there's a book, and there's the Gospel according to Luke. So I'm going to read a little bit about him. You know, the Spirit just kind of hopped on me to talk about this, man. So it is what it is. This is page 700 out of the Nelson's Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Okay, down at the bottom. It says, Luke, a fellow laborer of the Apostle Paul. Salakia. It says, Philemon, verse 24. And the author of the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles. By profession, he was a physician. Colossians 4 and 14. During one of Paul's imprisonments, it says probably in Rome, Luke's faithfulness was recorded by Paul when he declared, "Only Luke is with me." 2 Timothy 4 and 11. Okay. These three references are our only direct knowledge of Luke in the New Testament. A bit more of Luke's life and personality can be pieced together with the aid of his writings, Luke in Acts, and some outside sources. Tradition records, Salakia records, that he came from Antioch, Syria. Okay? And it says this is possible because Antioch played a significant role in early Gentile mission. Salakia, in the early Gentile mission that Luke described in Acts chapter 11, all right, verse 13, 14, 15, and 18. It says Luke was a Gentile, Colossians 4, 10 through 17, and the only, it says, I'm not going to entertain what it just said there. Okay, he's an Israelite author. He was I guess he probably wasn't from the tribe of Judah. Let's put it like that. But he was an Israelite. Damn sure was. All right, everybody's an Israelite in the Bible who's an author, you know, these books. Because this is written by Israel, for Israel, period. Okay. So it says, a comparison of 2 Corinthians 8 and 18 and 12 and 18 has led some to suppose that Luke and Titus were brothers, but this is a guess. It says Luke accompanied Paul on parts of his second, third, and final missionary journeys. At three places in Acts, the narrative changes to the first person, we. This probably indicates that Luke was personally present. Okay. Luke was personally present during those episodes on the second journey. Okay. Luke accompanied Paul on this short voyage from Troas to Philippi. Troas is Troy. Okay. All right. It says Luke was present on the voyage from Philippi to Jerusalem in Acts 25 through 21. It says whether Luke had spent It says the intervening time in Philippi is uncertain, but his connection with Philippi has led some to favor it, it says, rather than Antioch as Luke's home. Once in so-called Palestine, Luke probably remained close by Paul during his 2-year imprisonment in Caesarea. During this time, Luke probably drew together material, both oral and written, which he later Salakia, where was I? Oh, okay. Drew together material, both oral and written, it says, which he later used in the composition of his gospel. Okay. Luke 1, 1 through 4. It says, a third we passage describes in masterful suspense the shipwreck during Paul's voyage to Rome. For this trial before Caesar, each of the we passages involves Luke on a voyage, and the description of the journey from Jerusalem to Rome is full observations and knowledge of nautical matters, Acts 27. So yeah, that does make sense. If Luke wrote it, then he must have been there, because it's an eyewitness account, basically. So it says, Luke apparently was a humble man with no desire to sound his own horn. More than 1/4 of the New Testament comes from his pen. Okay, it says, but not once does he mention himself by name. He had greater command of the Greek language and was probably more broad-minded and urbane than any other New Testament writer. He was a careful historian, both by his own admission, Luke 1, 1 through 4, and by the judgment of later history. Luke's gospel reveals his concern for the poor, sick, and outcast, thus offering a clue to why Paul called him the beloved physician. Colossians 4 and 14. He was faithful not only to Paul, but to the greater cause he served, the publication of good tidings of great joy. Luke 2 and 10. Okay, and that's basically it. Now we could go into the actual gospel according to Luke, which there's so much of this, man. But we'll try to get through it, power through it real quick. It says, the third gospel, in which the great truths of Yahawashi are communicated primarily through vivid stories, Luke is the first of a 2-part work. In this work, the history of the gospel is traced from its beginnings in the life of Yahawashi, and it's the gospel of Luke, to the founding of the early church in the Acts of the Apostles. It says the author of the Gospel of Luke is more interested in persons, especially those in trouble, than in ideas. He is a skilled writer. He's also a skilled writer, and the literary quality of the Gospel of Luke is the highest of all 4 Gospels. Luke often is the most interesting Gospel to read, but he is also a serious historian who places Yahawashi within the context of world history. He presents Yahawashi and the church as the fulfillment of the history of salvation. Structure of the gospel, and which is true, brothers. When I was reading Luke, the verbiage is totally different than Matthew, Mark, and John. Totally different. It's much more scholarly, and you could definitely tell. If you're a man of the Lord, and who's observant. That's why you got to read, man. That's why you got to read, and you got to do videos. All right. Anyway, structure of the gospel says the literary structure of the Gospel of Luke is constructed primarily around Yahawashi's ministry in Galilee. In Jerusalem, the first 2 chapters of the Gospel could be entitled Introduction and Infancy, Salakia. Here Luke declares his purpose in writing, chapter 1, 1 through 4, and he tells the immortal stories of the births of John the Baptist and Yahushai. The ministry of Yahushai begins with a note Salakia, of expectation in chapter 3. The rulers of Rome, of the Roman world at the time, are named. Next accounts are given of the preaching of John the Baptist and Yahushai's baptism, genealogy, and temptation. This is chapter 3, 1 through 4, and verse 13 as well. It says, between his temptation, transfiguration, Yahushai conducted his ministry in Galilee, convinced of his approaching death. Yahushua steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, where, like the prophets before him, he would accept his fate. This journey occupies the central part of Luke. It says, the reader is kept in dramatic tension as Yahushua moves to Jerusalem, and the shadow of the cross darkens his pathway. The cross, however, is not simply unlucky fate. On the contrary, the Son of Man goes, as it's quoting, the Son of Man goes as it has been determined. Luke 22 and 22. So it's already been written. To fulfill the divine plan from which he came. Okay. Like Moses, Yahushua accomplished his accomplished for his people a deliverance from sin to salvation. The events of Yahushua's final week in Jerusalem. Okay, verse 19, chapter 19 and verse 28 to 24. It says, conclude the gospel, and the ascension serves as a transition from the end of Luke to the beginning of Acts. And this is the truth, man. Absolutely. Authorship and date. It says the author does not identify himself by name, but he does tell us a good deal about himself. Although not an eyewitness of the events he reports, he has followed them closely enough to write an orderly, reliable narrative. He is an educated man with the best command of the Greek of any New Testament writer. He counts among his acquaintances a person of high social standing, the most excellent. Theophilus, it says, to whom he addresses both Luke in Acts 1 and 1. As a Gentile, the author is interested in Gentiles. He is equally disinterested in matters purely of just the tribe of Judah, I guess, as it states. Take this with a grain of salt, brothers. Remember, Edomites did author this most likely. It says, at some point in his life, he joined the Apostle Paul. His experiences with Paul served as his first-hand source for his sequel to the Gospel of Luke. For the author's name, we are dependent on later tradition. Writing about 175, Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyon, identified the author as Luke, the companion of Paul. Eusebius agreed, adding that Luke was a native of Antioch. The importance of Antioch in Acts 13 lends credibility to Eusebius' statement. And it says Acts 13, 1 through 3. Okay, it says a few glimpses we get of Luke from Paul's epistles, a physician both beloved and compassionate, Colossians 4 and 14, who was with Paul during his Roman imprisonment, Philemon, verse 24, 2 Timothy 4 and 11, parallels what we gather from him in Luke through Acts. The logical conclusion is that Luke wrote Luke and Acts. The date of Luke's writing, it says, the date of Luke's writing can only be guessed from inferences. Luke tells us that he drew upon earlier accounts, some of which were written. Okay, it says chapter 1 and verse 2. It says, it is likely that two such accounts were about AD 50 and the Gospel of Mark written about 60 AD. The Gospel of Luke probably was written sometime shortly after 70 AD. Okay, also see the Gospels. Then it talks about the historical setting and everything like that. I don't want to bore you, brothers, and keep going on with this. Um, that's pretty much it. I don't want to, like I said, keep going on furthermore. If you do have it, because there's a lot, and there's a lot about this. There's so much more about the Gospel of Luke. I might do it just a part two. I want to break it off in sections, if anything. The Lord willing, that was edifying to you, brothers, just to give you a little bit of history on Luke and some little target references of where you can go to research the scriptures about Luke. For whatever reason, the Spirit just had me, bring this out. So, Shalom, brothers. Might do a part two, might not. Never know. Stay tuned. Shalom.